that marriage wasn't his marriage to her. I'm not really sure about how solid that was.
At 63, Nell Newman, daughter of the iconic Paul Newman, shocked everyone with a wild CBS Sunday morning interview that flipped Hollywood upside down. She didn't just talk. She exposed secrets that shattered her father's perfect image. The world always saw Paul as the flawless husband with those famous blue eyes, but Nell revealed a darker truth. She said behind that charming smile was a man torn between fame and a hidden love. And in his final will, he left it all to one mysterious name. R.R. Who was R.R.? And what secret could drive one of Hollywood's most adored men to walk away from his wife and kids for a love buried till his last breath? The mystery runs deep, each layer darker than the one before. In fancy Westport, Connecticut, where the rich hide behind their gates, the Newman estate looked like a dream. But inside that mansion, paradise cracked. Little Nell, sketching under the old oak, started to notice what no one else dared, that even in luxury, truth slices deeper than betrayal. In that house, some questions could destroy you. Asking the wrong thing could cost you your parents' love. Nell once thought her family was perfect, just like the smiling photos on their walls. But one day she saw the truth. Pictures don't talk, and neither did her family. In all her memories, not once had she seen her parents hold hands. Every sweet pose for the camera was pure acting. A stiff embrace, a fake scene they had to finish. Their love story wasn't real anymore, just a performance gone cold. Paul Newman, the world's charmer, turned icy once the doors closed. Those blue eyes that melted hearts looked flat at home, and the warmth people imagined wasn't there. Joanne Woodward, stunning and soft-spoken, went tense when he walked in. The room got heavier. Nell reached for her mother's hand and whispered, "Are you sad?" Her mother yanked away like she touched fire. She wasn't mad. She didn't know how to reach when feelings got real. At dawn, Paul slipped out without a word. No note, no why. He vanished for days, even weeks, and when he returned, Nell got a hollow smile before he ducked into his study and clicked the lock, shutting out the house and them like strangers. In that quiet place, Nell heard her father's deep laugh bounce down the halls during calls, a laugh that didn't belong to her mother's world. Whoever he was talking to, it was never Joanne. Then came that night in 1972. A sharp crack. A wine glass exploding like a scream in the dark. Nell rushed in, found Joanne on the floor, hand nicked, gripping a jagged shard, her voice shaking as she repeated, "You lied again! You lied again!" Terrified, Nell asked, "What did Father do?" Joanne's lips shook. Then, as Nell tells it, she whispered, "Not every man loves women, darling, but Hollywood will never accept that." That line carved straight into Nell's chest like ice. Days later, digging through her father's things, Nell says she found proof no one dared name, a worn Polaroid hidden in his wallet. In it, Paul Newman beamed brighter than she'd ever seen, arm around another man with a tenderness that said it all. His eyes weren't acting in that shot. They looked lit up with real love. Shaken, Nell showed her mother the photo, and Joanne snatched it fast, no hesitation. She ripped it to pieces and fed the fire, whispering through her teeth, "We will never speak of this, never." The room felt like it stopped breathing. After that, Nell learned the house rules. Don't ask where he vanished. Don't ask why Mom needed pills to sleep. Don't ask why they lived on separate floors like strangers under one roof. Above everything, never ask about love. We lived surrounded by walls covered in Oscars and movie posters, Nell once choked, but not one of them spoke of happiness. The place looked flawless from the street, a golden frame fantasy, but those smiles hid a silence that could snap a heart in two. When guests came, Gore Vidal, Robert Redford, and slick faces in from New York, the whole vibe shifted fast. Paul stepped out too sharp, too polished, wearing a mask the family didn't recognize, and like clockwork, the night ended with his bedroom door locking tight. No one asked who joined him, or why Joanne slipped away early, pale, red-eyed, like she'd cried where no one could see. Those walls gleamed with trophies, but the vibe inside was all pretense, not peace. Nell finally admitted, Our portraits looked flawless, but our hearts were empty. The life looked perfect on paper, and for years she thought she was the problem for sensing something was off.
Yeah, but there's some quite there is trauma. There is such a thing, and some of the trauma was, trauma light, and some of it was really, really heavy stuff. So she was recovering from her own trauma, and she passed that on.
As she got older, the mask slipped. One night she found her father alone in the kitchen, staring at a crumpled letter before torching it with a silver lighter engraved GV. When she gently asked who it was for, Paul met her with those piercing blue eyes and said, calm and final, "Don't become someone I have to keep a secret from." That line stalked her for life. The moment that cut deepest came on a restless night when her mother drifted through the hall in a sleepwalking haze, whispering, "I'm not jealous of women. I'm just scared I'll never be enough compared to him." That one confession ripped through decades of silence like a siren in the dark. And the first person bold enough to crack that silence wasn't Nell. It was her brother, Scott Newman, who finally pulled back the curtain on the family's heaviest secret. He asked the question no one dared to say out loud, and after that, the house felt colder, the stakes higher, the truth too sharp to ignore. Scott, Paul Newman's eldest, the one Hollywood dubbed his rebellious double, grew up under spotlights that burned more than they blessed. What the world called brilliance, he clocked as performance covering real pain. Behind the cameras and smiles, he saw the truth for what it was. Not a glow of glory, but the harsh beam of a stage light on a tragedy set to blow. Nell's voice shook in her 2025 CBS interview as she said, "He was the first to say out loud what we'd all been choking on for years." From day one, Scott carried the impossible weight of a legend's name, expected to be everything Paul was, polished, confident, magnetic, perfect. But he saw the cracks early, even in high school, and the questions wouldn't quit. Why have I never seen Mom hold Dad's hand? Why does he walk past her tears like they're invisible? And why, every time I tell him I love you, Dad, does he just smirk and look away? Then came the question that blew the lid off everything. Why is Dad always surrounded by men who seem more than just friends? It was the line no one dared say, the one that made the house feel brittle, like the air might shatter if you breathed too hard. I still remember those nights, Nell recalled, eyes heavy with grief. Mom would be crying behind her locked door, and Scott would lose control, smashing his guitar until the neck snapped in two. Meanwhile, their father sat downstairs, silent and far away, staring at the evening news with a drink in his hand, acting like he couldn't hear the storm upstairs. Right then, the cracks in the shiny Newman image weren't just showing. They were splitting wide open. In 1974, it all crashed at what should have been a harmless high school party. Too many drinks, a mean laugh, then a boy spit out, "Hey, Scott, maybe you should ask your dad if he likes men or women before you try to be like him." Those words cut deep, and Scott erupted, rage boiling over, leaving the boy injured and needing 6 stitches. Days later, the school expelled him, future wiped out in a snap. But the worst part wasn't the punishment, it was the silence that followed. Paul Newman didn't show up, didn't call, didn't write. He sent a lawyer with a thick envelope to make it disappear, quiet and cold. No comfort, no fatherly hug, nothing. Scott came home humiliated and crushed, grabbed his old school award and fired it into the flames, shouting, "You don't protect me! You don't protect Mom! Then who are you, really?" That question sliced through the house like lightning, the one truth no one dared to speak finally out in the open. Yet the Newman home stayed dead quiet. No one answered. No one ever did. A year later, Nell found a small notebook under Scott's mattress, the kind of secret that burns to touch. The pages were messy, stained with tears, every word written through pain. One line hit her hardest. "If he doesn't really love Mom, then who am I? Am I just an accident? Was I born out of love, or just to protect his image?" Those words strangled her heart like a vice. But truth doesn't stay buried forever. It kicked down the door in 1977 when Confidential Weekly dropped a bomb that froze Hollywood. A black and white photo from Malibu Beach, dated 1959, hit the stands. A man who looked exactly like Paul Newman walking barefoot, hand in hand with another man. No scandalous poses, just two crisp white shirts, rolled sleeves, and a look in their eyes that said everything. It wasn't friendship. It was something raw, something real. The industry panicked. Reporters didn't say it outright, but headlines screamed in whispers. Who is the man in Paul's life and the hidden side of Hollywood's most masculine star? Overnight, gossip became wildfire, and the Newman family's golden image started to crack wide open. Right then, Scott Newman was on the edge of his big break, his first major action film role ready to go. But days before filming, the call came, he was out. No reason, no warning, just silence. Then came the final blow. In a crowded studio hallway, he overheard a producer murmur, "Audiences won't buy him as a hero if his father's living a double life." That single sentence shattered him like glass. That night, something inside Scott snapped. He smashed the bathroom mirror, glass skidding across the tile, then traced a shallow line on his wrist, not to end things, but enough to make his mother scream at the sight of blood. It wasn't just a cut. It was years of buried pain breaking loose. And Paul? Nowhere near home, not even the same state. He was in New York, spotted with an associate the press politely called a close companion. After that, Scott changed fast. He shut people out, changed his number, and slipped into drugs. Not chasing thrills, but trying to mute the cold, distant eyes of a father who never really saw him. All of America adored him, Nell recalled with a trembling voice. They worshiped the legend, while we lived in the silence behind it. She remembered calling Scott, praying for warmth in his voice, but all she got was a tired sigh. Then a click. That dead air said more than words ever could. The last time they spoke, Scott asked one brutal question. "Do you think Dad ever truly loved anyone?" Nell couldn't answer. The truth felt too heavy to touch. A month later, on November 20th, 1978, LAPD forced their way into Scott's small apartment, and what they found froze everything in place. He lay still on the floor, pills nearby, a half-finished bottle of red wine, and the TV light flickering across his face. And on that TV, Paul Newman, smiling as he walked across a stage to accept an award for Slapshot. The timing felt eerie, the world cheering while his son's light faded in silence. The report was short, almost robotic. No signs of violence, cause of death, suspected suicide due to drug overdose. But Nell, only 18 then, felt a different truth in her bones, and Scott didn't die from drugs or alcohol. He died from silence. He died because no one ever answered the question that chased him his whole life. Did our father ever live in truth? That question echoed in Nell's head for years, cutting deeper as the bigger picture came into focus. The family, the house, even the shining legacy, all stacked layer by layer on secrets too risky to name and a silence that swallowed everything. Then came a bitter winter night in 1981, snow whipping the Westport yard while Nell watched it vanish under white, realizing truth can disappear too if nobody remembers it. In that deep quiet, 22-year-old Nell pulled her sweater tight and headed for the kitchen to grab a blanket when she froze mid-hallway. A warm yellow glow leaked from her father's half-closed study door, flickering across the dark floorboards like a secret waving her in. What stopped her wasn't the light, it was a sigh. Not an actor's practice breath, not a tired exhale after a call, but something heavy and loaded, like years of unsaid words pushing to escape. It sounded like a secret scratching at the door, begging to be heard. Heart pounding, she moved closer and peered through the crack. Paul sat bowed at his desk, fountain pen racing across a stack of pages. Not a script, not business, a letter, handwritten and personal, 3 full pages of it like he couldn't hold it in anymore. She knew the handwriting right away, the same looping script he used once a year on Christmas cards to her mother. But the name at the top wasn't Joanne, and that's when her breath hitched as she made out the first line. "Dear Red, the one who reminds me that I am still human, not merely a symbol." The room tilted for her. That single sentence told more than she'd ever been allowed to ask. Those shaky ink strokes felt like a confession written in plain sight, raw and risky. In that letter, he didn't brag about movies, awards, or fame. None of that polished stuff showed up. It was just a stripped-down voice. No roles, no mask, A man finally daring to put his truth on paper for the one person who made him feel real. He didn't write about awards, applause, or glory. None of that glitter. Paul poured his heart into memories way more personal, the kind no one outside ever knew. He wrote about how Robert Redford's eyes caught the desert light while filming Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and how, between takes, Redford's hand would brush his shoulder when no one was watching, a tiny touch that said everything words couldn't. Paul confessed that on those hotel rooftops, they'd sit for hours with a bottle of whiskey between them, silent, because if either spoke, the truth might explode out and never stop. One line in that letter branded itself into Nell's mind forever. There was one night you looked at me, only looked, and I felt as if the whole world had forgiven me. Red, you didn't need to say a word, but if you ever walked into this room again and looked at me the way you once did, I would give up everything, the fame, the family, all of Hollywood. Nell's hands shook reading it, pulse thundering till she could barely breathe. It felt like every wall of her childhood collapsing in one heartbeat. Then the phone rang in the next room, sharp, sudden, breaking the spell. Paul rose, footsteps fading down the hall. Panicked, Nell slipped the letter back exactly where it was, heart racing like she'd just trespassed into a vault of buried truth. But one thing burned clear in her mind now. Her father hadn't been writing to just a friend. He'd been writing to the one who truly held his heart. A few weeks later, that truth seemed to step out of the shadows. At least, that's how this story frames it. Joanne Woodward, in California for a Vogue cover, suddenly canceled and caught the first flight to Westport after an anonymous call with no name or number dropped one icy line that shook her world. The message was blunt and cold. If you still care about your marriage, go to the Mayflower Hotel, room 708. That was it. No details, just a sentence that could blow a life apart. That same night, Paul told Joanne he had a New York business meeting to discuss a new script. But in this narrative, that partner wasn't a producer, it was Robert Redford, the man tabloids had long hinted might be his true soulmate. No one ever proved what happened in room 708, and the door to that truth stayed locked. Everything here is presented as memory and rumor, not confirmed fact. But when Joanne returned, the story says her silence was loud, her face pale, eyes puffy beneath makeup, and what looked like a dark bruise on her arm, the kind you get from being held too tight. She didn't speak a word. That night, the usually quiet mansion burst with noise. Not shouting, just glass and porcelain crashing behind their bedroom door, including one of Joanne's prized Italian lamps in pieces like ice on the floor. Afterward, the account claims Paul changed up, smoking again after quitting in the 60s and losing sleep, sitting on the porch past midnight like he was searching the dark for answers he couldn't say out loud. Sometimes Nell would spot him frozen at a mirror, fist locked around a fountain pen till his knuckles went white. Like the pen itself carried words he refused to write. One evening, when Nell dropped a Beatles record and it cracked, the sound sent him spinning. He grabbed the Baccarat crystal vase, the one gifted on their wedding day, and smashed it against the table without a word. The silence after was louder than a scream, and he just walked out, leaving a room full of broken glass and memories nobody dared touch. The silence Paul left that night weighed more than any scream. Thick, smoky, filling every inch of the house. Joanne floated through the mansion like a ghost, her glow gone, her voice empty. From then on, she never called him honey or my love again. Those words died that night. When a reporter once asked about Robert Redford, she fired back just 2 words. That man. No warmth, no tone, no name, just emptiness. It was the sound of someone too tired to fake it anymore. At that point, Nell was studying ecology, miles from the drama, but slowly she started seeing the truth. Her parents' marriage wasn't built on love. It was a 50-year act. 2 top-tier actors stuck in their own movie, keeping the illusion alive for the cameras. But 1 call, 1 letter, 1 hotel room, that was enough to tear the whole script apart. Afterward, Nell began noticing things she'd never seen before. In an old drawer in her father's study, she found pages of phone numbers marked only with single letters, R, T, and sometimes just a question mark. Some were crossed out, others had notes scribbled beside them. Call after 10 p.m. or don't let Joanne know. It was like decoding a secret life hiding in plain sight. She found photos, too. Old, folded tight, tucked behind family portraits. The faces were strangers, but their eyes said it all. They looked at Paul the same way he once looked at Redford, with that quiet kind of love that couldn't be spoken. And just when Nell thought she'd finally seen it all, every secret, every scar, something even crazier hit her. Redford might have been the most important man in her father's heart. But he wasn't the only one, because in 1981, inside the marble-bright lobby of the Carlisle Hotel, playground of New York's elite, whispers slid through velvet halls like smoke. A fresh secret drifted under chandeliers and champagne bubbles, one no one, not even Nell, saw coming. That night at the Carlisle was supposed to be routine, a quick errand, nothing major. Fresh from a promising TV internship interview, Nell swung by to drop documents for her mother. But when the elevator doors opened, her world froze like a scene that never should have been filmed. Down the corridor, glowing under gold light, stood her father, Paul Newman. But he wasn't alone, and he wasn't with Joanne. Walking beside him was Gore Vidal, the famed writer and razor-sharp voice who'd been a family friend for over 20 years. Only this time, the distance of friendship was gone. The air between them felt charged, like static before a storm. Nell watched as Gore's hand brushed Paul's wrist, just a heartbeat, but loud enough to say what words wouldn't. Paul turned with a small, knowing smile. Both men in dark overcoats, shoulder to shoulder, so close a single breath could have brought their faces together. It wasn't scandalous. It was intimate, quiet, and impossible to misread. And then Paul looked up and saw her. Nell would later tell Esquire in 2018, voice shaking, "That look will stay with me forever." It wasn't the look of a man caught doing something wrong. It was the look of someone silently pleading, "Don't say it, please, don't!" Exclamation mark. For a long second, nobody moved. The hallway felt like it stopped breathing. Gore glanced her way and gave a calm, polite smile, like nothing wild was happening, like the floor wasn't splitting under their feet. Right there, under the Carlisle's glitter, Nell's childhood ideas about love and family crumbled. Quiet, clean, final. Paul stepped into without a word, doors sliding shut like a slow curtain, and the secret sealed itself between them for good. Nell stood frozen, her reflection shaking in the mirror, realizing she now held something she could never say out loud. From then on, Gore Vidal didn't fade. He hovered. His name slipped into daily life. A call here, a visit there, and nobody explained a thing. Nell heard 2 a.m. phone rings, watched business trips stretch for days, and saw small notes by the house phone. G called, call back. One afternoon, she watched Paul slide a photo from his pocket. A black and white shot of him and Gore by a lake, leaning back to back, both staring off like the same thought had them by the throat. It didn't look like friendship. It looked like a line crossed and never uncrossed. Unable to hold it in, Nell finally asked her mother, "Do you think Dad isn't the man you always thought he was?" Joanne Woodward, the Oscar winner who once played a woman with multiple selves, went still, then said softly, "There are some things no one ever teaches us how to put into words, but they still exist every single day, even when we pretend to forget." For Nell, that was enough. Silence had become the family's second language, and this time it shouted louder than the truth itself. As for Gore Vidal, he never openly admitted anything, not once. But in 1995, his memoir, Palimpsest, dropped a line that froze the room and made everyone wonder who he meant. "There are men who will never belong to us, but every time they smile, we feel alive." Those words hit like thunder, and for Nell, the meaning wasn't in doubt. Gore never said Paul Newman's name, not in public, not in print. Yet people connected the dots anyway. Reporters didn't need a confession. The truth felt baked into the margins. And Gore hadn't written like that about anyone else. Only one man stayed unnamed, Paul, the one who never confessed a thing. Years later, during a 2006 Vanity Fair interview, the question finally landed, clean and direct. The journalist asked, "Was Paul Newman the greatest love of your life?" Gore paused, raised his glass, took a slow sip, then looked into the camera and said softly, "We shared nights that neither of us ever wanted to leave. That is all I can say." The studio went silent. No follow-ups needed. But Nell didn't need an interview to tell her what she already knew. The truth had been carved into her family long ago, and it never left. By 2003, Joanne Woodward began to fade, the first signs of memory loss creeping in. Birthdays forgotten, names misplaced, familiar faces suddenly strange. Yet even as her mind drifted between dream and memory, one thing refused to fade. One night, half asleep, she suddenly gripped Nell's hand with surprising strength, whispering, "Do you know the way your father looked at Gore? That was a gaze he never once gave to me. And even if I forget everything, even if I lose myself, I'll never be able to forget that look." Those words cracked something deep inside Nell. The great Joanne Woodward had carried the image of perfect love, only to admit she was never seen the way her husband saw another. For decades, Joanne stood as Hollywood grace itself, smart, loyal, quietly powerful in a town of illusions, an Oscar winner for The Three Faces of Eve, and a life cover star, the woman Paul Newman vowed he would never leave. But behind that promise lived a love story the world never saw, built on silence, sacrifice, and a truth too risky to speak out loud. For years, Paul Newman and Joanne Woodward were celebrated as America's golden couple, radiant, romantic, flawless, the perfect fairy tale in lights. By the end, all that shine faded into a distant echo, and Joanne sat alone in a quiet nursing home in Westport, the same town where their once bustling mansion stood, weak sunlight slipping through a dusty window onto her frail, trembling hands, the same hands that held Paul's heart for more than 50 years. Alzheimer's crept in like a silent thief, stealing her piece by piece. Dates that mattered, like Nell's birthday, and moments that once felt immortal. The first big role, the trophies, the electric Broadway nights, all drifting into a soft fog of forgetting. One afternoon, Nell brought a photograph, a glowing shot of Joanne and Paul at the 1974 Golden Globes, and Joanne studied it, eyes searching before whispering, "Who is this person? Do I know them?" The question hit like a punch because her mother no longer recognized the very love story the world had worshipped. Yet even as memory unraveled, one name refused to fade, rising again and again, steady and haunting. Not Paul, not Nell, not any of her children, but Robert. At first, Nell chalked it up to confusion, a trick of a fading mind. But the nurses started trading uneasy looks, whispering about nights when Joanne jolted awake with empty eyes and a clear voice, like a buried truth was clawing its way out. In the dark, Joanne murmured confessions no one had heard, a strange perfume on Paul's clothes, unanswered calls from the Essex house in New York, a single golden hair on a white pillow, little clues that cut like glass. Every time she spoke, her tone carried the ache time never healed, the ache of a woman who knew her husband's heart wasn't fully hers, yet couldn't bring herself it out loud. Then she finally let a name fall, slow and shaking. Robert Redford. The sound sent a chill through Nell, a name she hadn't heard in decades, not since she was 17 and stumbled into a memory she tried to bury forever. Back then, she'd skipped school, took a train to New York, and drifted into the Essex house, the same place her mother now whispered in the night. As the elevator doors slid open, Nell froze behind a marble pillar, heart pounding, as her father stepped out in a sharp gray suit. And beside him walked Robert Redford, easy and close. She watched Paul's hand rest on Robert's shoulder, heard their soft laughter as they crossed the lobby, calm and unguarded, like two people who had stopped pretending long ago. It wasn't scandalous. It felt natural, real, quiet, a closeness that didn't need words. Nell locked that moment deep, shoving it so far down she almost convinced herself it never happened, never telling her mother or anyone else. She told herself she'd misunderstood. She was young, dramatic, imagining things. And she kept that secret to protect the fragile illusion her family was built on, the shiny picture everyone else believed in. But now, hearing her mother's weak, fading voice name the same hotel, the same scent, the same unspoken sorrow, the walls inside Nell collapsed. The truth she'd buried came roaring back, unstoppable. Joanne's voice cut through the quiet, soft, but devastating. "That was the day he betrayed me," she whispered, staring at a sunny Rhode Island photo from their happier years. "In 1985, he told me he was meeting a director about a new script, but I always knew, because that never meant for me." Didn't sound jealous. They sounded final, like truth stepping into daylight, a truth hidden under fame, marriage, and polish, until the name Robert Redford snapped everything into focus. Joanne lowered her head, voice trembling like a candle's last flicker, and forced out the line that wouldn't die. "Essex House, room 1217. I called the whole night, but no one ever picked up." To most, it might have seemed like fragments from a fading mind. But to Nell, it hit like thunder. That exact room, that hotel, matched the memory she'd buried for decades. The same night she'd seen her father with Robert, the puzzle finally clicking into cruel clarity. Nell sat frozen, chest heavy, like someone set a stone on it and kept pressing. Her mother, the woman who defended Paul's name for half a century, still held that room number with painful precision, even as illness stripped everything else away. Joanne never screamed about betrayal. She didn't need to. The way her eyes drifted toward the sunset each evening, filled with a quiet, endless ache, said more than any accusation ever could. Those dim but steady eyes were her final truth, carved into every glance. For years, silence had been the family's second language, and Nell felt it closing in again, tight, airless, undeniable. One afternoon, she finally found her voice and asked, "Mom, do you still remember how Dad loved you?" Joanne turned slowly, eyes cloudy but steady, and whispered, "I once believed it, but after that day, I no longer did." That single line cracked the myth the world worshipped. The perfect Hollywood romance popped like a soap bubble under hard light. Just when the family braced for Joanne's slow, sorrowful goodbye, fate swerved with one last twist waiting in the wings. Everyone thought Paul would stay by her side to the end, the devoted icon with the soft smile and kind eyes. But what surfaced hit like lightning. Behind that familiar charm sat a choice so cold and deliberate it rocked the family to the core, at least as this account tells it. Not a mistake, not a paperwork fluke. Planned, intentional, every detail lined up long before he was gone. When Nell sat down with her father's will, her breath snagged, and each line felt worse than the last. The Newman's own empire, said to be worth over $100 million, didn't split the way he'd always promised, according to this telling. Nothing for Joanne, who'd stood beside him for 50 years as her memories slipped away, and nothing for the kids who carried the cost of the image that built his legend. In this narrative, every cent, share, and trace of fortune went to one man, Robert Forrester, the name that lingered like a quiet shadow, business associate, close friend, always mentioned, never explained, now inked across the final pages of Paul's life. The shock wasn't just the money. It was the message, the cold precision of it, the way it rewrote everything they thought they knew about love, loyalty, and what was real behind the glossy photos on the wall. Then came the final blow, the lawyer's voice echoing as he read, "Anyone who contests this will forfeit even the small cash allocation provided." The words hit like ice water in Nell's chest. She turned to her sister Clea and whispered, "We didn't just lose our father. We lost the chance to ever really know who he was." That line hung heavy, too raw to dodge. The world saw Paul Newman as a saint, generous, devoted, a Hollywood hero. But to his family, those last papers hinted at something darker, a carefully built image covering a hidden loyalty and a love they were never meant to see, at least as this account frames it. According to a leaked confidential addendum to Paul's will, allegedly exposed by a former law firm assistant, a shocker sat deep in the files. He had once planned a private trust called the Quiet Legacy. The wild part wasn't the name, it was the beneficiary. The first person listed wasn't Joanne, wasn't Nell, wasn't any child. It was someone identified only by two initials, RR. Once that detail leaked, the media pounced. Vanity Fair and the New York Post ran splashy pieces suggesting what whispers already floated, that RR meant Robert Redford, though none of this was ever officially confirmed. Overnight, old rumors people brushed off as gossip came roaring back harder than ever. Suddenly, folks reread the whole story, the years of friendship, the private trips, the glances in interviews, while reporters rewatched archives, searching every frame for subtext. Then came the darkest twist. A journalist from The Advocate claimed Paul and Robert took a secret 1982 trip to Tuscany. No wives, no kids, no assistants, just the two of them in a gated villa with staff, dismissed for the week, or so the story alleged. When Nell heard it, her world spun. She'd never heard of that trip. Not from her father, not her mother, not anyone. So she called Dorothy Hughes, her mom's longtime friend and assistant from the 80s. Dorothy's voice went heavy before she said, Joanne knew. But she chose silence. She thought that if Paul had his freedom, maybe he would come back to her. Not whole, but still hers. Those words slammed into Nell like a storm. Her mother had known and carried that truth in silence for years. In the end, Paul Newman didn't just leave behind movies, fame, and philanthropy. He left a fortress, a wall of wealth and legal words, all handed to another man to guard, cold and sharp enough to slice the last thread tying him to the family that once believed they were his greatest love. No letters, no notes, not even a single line of explanation, just the rigid ink of his final signature. And when reporters demanded answers, only one man stepped up. At a 2009 press conference, Robert Forrester said calmly, "He trusted me, and I believe that's the only thing that truly matters." It sounded like a gavel on steel, final and untouchable. The door slammed shut, sealing away every answer Nell would never hear. Her mind filled with questions that had nowhere to go. How could a man who swore he'd live and die for his family leave them like strangers at his own grave? On September 26th, 2008, the world lost Paul Newman. The man with the famous blue eyes, the legend whose charm shaped Hollywood for 50 years. He passed in his quiet farmhouse in Westport, surrounded by the same town that once believed his life was perfect. The nation mourned. CBS aired tributes filled with the Hustler and Cool Hand Luke clips. CNN ran memorial specials, voices from co-stars and fans praising the ultimate gentleman, the loyal husband, the loving father, the humanitarian hero. But that was only half the truth. Behind the cameras and glossy covers was a family cracked by secrets they never saw coming. 3 days after the public farewell, reality knocked. Cold and formal. Nell received a call from her father's private law office. The voice on the other end sounded detached, mechanical. "We have officially activated the will according to Mr. Newman's instructions. Please check your internal mailbox. The division of assets has been completed." That was it. No condolences, no emotion, just business. In that instant, Nell finally understood the harsh truth. Her father's last act wasn't about love or legacy. It was distance. The same distance that had always existed between him and the people who once called him Dad. Only a few minor points remained to be clarified. That's all the message said, and Nell's stomach twisted the second she read it. Something felt deeply wrong, and she was right. The final will, signed just 6 weeks before Paul's death, wasn't the version the family knew. It was rewritten, stripped down, and sealed in cold legal language that erased his wife and all 6 children. Gone, every mention. His entire fortune, more than $600 million, including Newman's own shares, real estate, image rights, and lifelong royalties, was moved to one entity, the Newman's own foundation. And who sat on top of that empire? Robert Forrester. The man Paul trusted in his final years, suddenly holding every thread of the legacy according to this account. The Newman family was outraged and heartbroken, but the loudest sound was silence. No major outlet pressed questions, and no investigator dug in. The same media that once worshipped Paul went quiet, never asking why his wife of 50 years, Joanne Woodward, already struggling with dementia, was written out. Nell, who once ran the Foundation's environmental arm, was dismissed months later with no reason, no warning, no explanation, like a stranger to the institution her family's name built. In 2015, in a rare New York Times interview, her composure finally cracked as she said, "I never asked for a dime, but I couldn't bear to see them turn my father into a brand and cast my mother aside as if she was never part of his life." Her words rang out like a cry buried for years. Whispers sparked a quiet, unofficial probe. Independent lawyers, reporters, and former colleagues combed records and timelines, and many landed on the same chilling idea as told here. The devastating conclusion that surfaced was simple and brutal. Paul Newman may not have been of sound mind when he signed that final will, a claim that, if true, would shake the image the world thought it knew. Leaked records from a New York clinic hinted that by mid-2007, Paul was showing signs of decline. Forgetfulness, confusion, mood swings, lapses in judgment. By May 2008, just 3 months before his final will, doctors reportedly listed him as having temporary incapacity for legal decision-making. But those papers vanished from official files, erased from court, unspoken in public. Then an anonymous source tied to Paul's legal team spoke to Vanity Fair, and the revelation rocked Hollywood. "I saw a handwritten letter Paul wrote to Joanne in June," the insider claimed. "It completely contradicted the will. He apologized, said he feared he wouldn't have time to fix the mistake, and begged her forgiveness if anything went wrong after he was gone. But that letter, the one piece that could have changed everything, never made it into the legal record. The source refused to reveal their name, saying they still feared for their life." By 2019, the Wall Street Journal picked up the thread, launching an investigation that asked the question everyone wanted answered. Who was really behind Paul Newman's final will? The Guardian went even further, calling it the greatest theft of legacy Hollywood has ever witnessed. And as for Robert Forrester, the man now running the Newman's own foundation, the story only grew darker. Once he took control, reports claimed he quietly doubled his salary while slicing budgets for the same causes Paul once championed. Charities long tied to the Newman family saw their funds gutted overnight. Environmental and children's programs were restructured or axed completely. The empire built to give back started looking colder, more corporate, more secretive, more self-serving. What had once been a legacy of love and generosity now felt tainted, wrapped in silence and questions no one seemed willing to answer. And through it all, Nell couldn't stop asking herself the one thought that haunted every sleepless night. Was her father's final act really his own? The foundation Paul Newman poured his heart into, backing kids' hospitals, charities, and green projects, had turned unrecognizable under Robert Forrester's control, with every Newman family member barred from the board like the name got erased from its own legacy. By 2020, Nell hit her limit and petitioned a Connecticut court to reopen the will, but the answer landed cold. There is insufficient evidence to prove Paul Newman was not of sound mind when he signed the will. Doors shut, case closed, heartbreak sealed. Then fate flipped the script in late 2021 when a former assistant sorting books in the Westport Library found a worn copy of The Prophet by Khalil Gibran. And tucked inside was a faded handwritten letter that felt like it had been waiting to be seen. The handwriting matched Paul's, and faint fingerprints still smudged the edges. It looked painfully real. The note was short, but it crushed the room. "My dearest Joanne, if I am no longer lucid enough to say this to you directly, then read it here. Everything belongs to you, from the name to the career to the reason I still exist after all these years. If anything goes astray, believe that I did not choose it. I love you until the very end." Paul, it wasn't legal proof, but it read like a last truth. A man caught between love, legacy, and the fear of losing control. Finally speaking from somewhere honest. When the find surfaced, the press rippled, old wounds reopened, and questions people thought were buried came back loud. In 2023, an ABC reporter asked if Nell still wanted the case reopened, and she gave a small, sad smile. There are things that can't be reclaimed with paperwork, but I believe my father left the truth somewhere. That letter, hidden more than a decade, did what courts and headlines never could. It gave Nell one last glimpse of who her father really was, stripped of the spotlight and the myth. And maybe, just maybe, Paul Newman is still waiting for the world to find the truth he left behind. The thing he buried wasn't money, recipes, or Hollywood glow. It was something simpler and painfully human. He was protecting himself. The real Paul Newman, a man blazing under spotlights while carrying shadows he never dared to name, was a legend to the world, but a mystery to his own heart. And when the curtain finally dropped and whispers turned into accusations and legal fights, only one thing mattered in Nell's chest. Not rage, not bitterness, not even the battle for what was lost. It was love. Quiet, stubborn, unbreakable love. Signatures could rewrite history, but no paper could erase a daughter's bond with her father. Invisible yet real, aching a little more each year. Nell Newman was called her father's spiritual heir, the one meant to carry his light. Her face sat on eco-friendly products. Her work matched the mission Paul said he lived for, and she believed she was continuing his legacy with pride. Then it was all stripped. The name, the mission, the right to belong to the world he built. Like her page in the story got scrubbed clean. Still, one thing never vanished. Blood, the tie no contract could cut. In her final CBS Sunday Morning interview in 2010, Nell's voice cracked through tears. "I never stopped loving my father," she said. "No matter what he did, no matter how I was shut out of every decision, I still loved him the way a daughter loves her father." Her words hung there, soft, shaking, unforgettable. A love story stronger than any scandal or will could ever be. And yet, love doesn't always walk with forgiveness. And unspoken truth turns into an abyss that eats memories whole. "I believe he loved us," Nell said quietly. "I want to believe that's true, but I just wish he'd been brave enough to live honestly. Not with the world, but with his own family." Her voice held no anger now, only exhaustion. The heavy pain of a daughter staring at a door that will never open again. She never explained what living honestly meant. She didn't have to, because everyone watching understood. In locked drawers, hidden letters, quiet backroom meets, and whispers traded by men once called his friends, the truth lay scattered like broken glass. Scott, Redford, Dean, each name a shard of a puzzle that would never be finished. These were the secrets Paul Newman carried to his grave, and the ones his family had to live with forever, punished not by money or loss, but by silence that settles in when love and truth can't share the same room. It wasn't just a will that split them. It was memory itself, cracking down the middle, leaving his children standing behind a legend, unseen, unheard, asking questions that would never get answers. So when the story closes, screen fading to black, spotlight dying, one question keeps echoing. Are we truly living as ourselves before it's too late? Some nights, Nell still sits on the old Westport porch where her father once watched the dark moonlight laying silver across the garden as the weight of what was said and what wasn't presses on her chest. He once tended that same patch of earth, now washed in pale light, the wind sliding through the maples like whispers that almost form words. And in that hush, she knows the real pain isn't cash lost, cold signatures, or rumors that won't quit. It's what stayed unspoken. The deepest wound is the emptiness, the hollow space between a father and daughter, not made by distance or death, but by silence stacked brick by brick from a lifetime of secrets. Love between a father and daughter doesn't die. It survives anger, betrayal, and sleepless nights packed with questions that never land. But when truth gets buried, love mutates into a quiet obsession, a stubborn longing that won't fade, like a river forced to run backward, fighting its own current for a way out. Deep down, Nell still wants one impossible thing: for her father just once to sit down, meet his children's eyes, and say everything with no hiding, no pretending, just the truth, raw and real, because even a hard truth beats a lifetime of silence. Now, with only fragments and unanswered questions left, she accepts what the world won't. Paul Newman will always be a paradox, the bright legend to millions, and to the ones who loved him most, an unsolved mystery whose brilliance matched the shadows he left behind. And maybe that emptiness is his real legacy, not built from fame, money, or movies, but from the questions that never die, questions that make us look inward and ask, do we really live honestly with who we are? Or do we hide behind silence until it's too late? Behind Hollywood's golden glow lies a trail of forgotten letters, lost children, and truths buried deep, maybe even with Paul Newman himself. But the mystery still lingers, whispering through time, through his films, through every life he brushed, daring us to wonder what secrets legends take to their graves. So now it's your turn. What do you think it means when a man praised for integrity hides a truth so heavy his own family never knew? Drop your thoughts below. And if this story hit home, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn on that notification bell for what's next.